Welcome back to Morning Joe. On our West Coast tour, we are in, it's Thursday? Must mean we're in Seattle.
You know, it's Seattle.
It's
Great
fabulous.
place.
I just had the most amazing, very strong cup of coffee here now with an important announcement this morning. Peter Schiff. You might remember him. He's the president of Euro-Pacific Capital and author of Crash Proof, How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. And he did predict it.
Well, Peter's been predicting it for some time. You can go on YouTube if you haven't seen it yet, and you can see him mocked by one financial expert after another over the past 4 or 5 years, predicting this imminent collapse. He was right. They were wrong. He announced this.
Yeah.
It's coming. Well, Peter, do you have another announcement this morning? Will you be running for the United States Senate against Chris Dodd?
Well, you know, about a year ago, I think, there was a grassroots effort to try to draft me to run for the U.S. Senate. It wasn't something that was on my mind, but there were a number of people who contributed to that effort. I received emails and telephone calls over the years. Ultimately, it prompted me to set up a exploratory committee. I launched a website, SchiffForSenate.com, several months ago, and better than 10,000 people have contributed more than $1 million to convince me to run for the U.S. Senate. And what I think that shows me is that there's a growing number of Americans out there who are fed up with what's going on, who understand that Washington does not represent the solution to our problems, but the source of our problems. And unfortunately, the economic collapse that I predicted is going to get a lot worse precisely because of the things the government has done over the last year to try to solve the problem that they created.
That's good. That must mean you're running.
Is that a yes?
that was a yes.
Well, what I decided is I can't sit idly by and just watch a train wreck in slow motion. I think it's important for me to stand up for the American taxpayer, for our country, and try to put a stop to this. And so I have decided to become a candidate for the U.S. Senate in my home state of Connecticut.
There we go.
Okay, and you're going to be running against Chris Dodd. Obviously, Chris Dodd has been very involved in the financial community for some time. What's going to be your key issue against Senator Dodd?
Well, first of all, I hope to eventually be running against Chris Dodd. Initially, I'm running against, I think, 4 or 5 other Republicans who are in the race right now who also want to run against Chris Dodd. But the main reason that I think we need to get rid of Chris Dodd is he represents all that's wrong with Congress. I mean, he is potentially the poster boy for the economic crisis, and not only the crisis of the past, but the most bigger crisis that we're going to go through over the next few years if someone doesn't go to Washington and put a stop to these destructive policies.
Pat Buchanan.
Peter, if you're a Senate candidate, let me ask you, would you support more American troops in Afghanistan?
Well, I want to bring American troops home. I don't think we have the money to fund the troops that we have all over the world. We're borrowing money from Japan. We're borrowing money from China and Saudi Arabia. We need to bring our budget under control. We need to have a sound economy before we can afford the luxury of having troops around the world.
Do you have an alternative health care plan? Do you think Republicans should come up with their own version of health care reform in 2009?
Sure. I think what the government, I think what the government has done is a disgrace to health care in this country. They've driven up the cost with government subsidies and with excess government involvement. The solution to health care is the same solution to anything, the same way we have a solution to clothing or food. It's the free market. It's individual entrepreneurs. It's competition. It's the profit motive. It's the invisible hand. It's everything that made this country great. We need to get government out of health care so we can bring private market forces back into it, and we can have individuals empowered to make their own choices, let doctors compete on quality and on price. And we can do that if we roll back government. But if we go in the direction of the Obama administration, we're going to compound the problems. We're going to drive health care costs even higher, and we're going to drive quality lower.
Aren't healthcare costs exploding right now at an unsustainable rate?
Yes, because of government. Why aren't other costs exploding at an unsustainable rate? If you look at everywhere the government gets involved, whether it's in education or in healthcare, you see the same dynamic. But even if you look at healthcare, if you take a look at certain segments of healthcare where the government isn't involved, where you don't have all the insurance companies, like eye LASIK surgery, you see prices are coming down. Every year it gets cheaper, and the quality improves because you don't have the government in there subsidizing these procedures.
But there are times when the government needs to get involved. Take North Carolina, Alabama, other states where one insurance company controls 85% of the healthcare business in that state. Shouldn't the government get involved with antitrust measures and make sure there is real competition?
Sure. Look, I think that's one thing. I think the government should open that up. I mean, maybe that would be one area of the Commerce Clause where I actually think the government has a right to intervene and say, look, to prevent states from making it illegal for citizens of one state to patronize an insurance company in another state. There's also things that the government can do in the way of malpractice reform to bring down health care costs. There are certainly things the government can do. But nationalizing health insurance, what the government wants to do now is not going to make the problem better. It's going to make it worse.
Well, and let's talk about more regulation. Obviously, Wall Street bankers were allowed to leverage their assets, 40-to-1 ratio. It was absolutely devastating. Do you not agree that the SEC over the past 8 years should have been more engaged, should have enforced regulations more aggressively than they had?
Well, the problem wasn't necessarily SEC, it was the Federal Reserve. The reason that these institutions were so leveraged up was because the Federal Reserve gave them the money. They were the source of the leverage. And with the Greenspan put, Alan Greenspan let everybody on Wall Street know that if anybody lost money, that the Fed was going to come to the rescue. You had this giant government-created moral hazard.
That's one part of the problem, though. But, Peter, that's one part of the problem. But you've got to look at the SEC. And whether you're talking about Bernie Madoff or sitting back and allowing 40-to-1 leverage rates, that hands-off approach from Christopher Cox at the SEC played a role, along with cheap money and cheap credit, with this economy going down.
The one place where the government should have regulated more was their own creations, Fannie and Freddie, because those two entities operated with government guarantees, and so there were no free market forces reining them in. There the government failed. They should have had more regulations in Fannie and Freddie, but they didn't because of their friends in Washington. People like Christopher Dodd were able to protect Fannie and Freddie and prevent any regulation from reining in their reckless activities.
Peter, the state Democratic Party in Connecticut has wasted no time welcoming you to the political arena. Here's what they say. Despite his groupie-like following, Schiff actually has few qualifications to run for Senate. He's publicly admitted he can't even remember the last time he voted. They go on to say that you've actually lost money for your clients. What do you say to that? Well,
most of those allegations are not true, particularly with respect to how I've done for my clients. I've been a broker all my life. I think I've had, in the last 10 years, we've had 1 year where clients have lost money. I think it was 2008. 2009 for most investors has more than recouped those losses. I think I've had a very good track record in the investment business. That's why I have so many clients. That's
why
should
people be worried about the lack of experience?
No, I think that's my greatest attribute. The fact that I haven't had experience ruining the country, that I haven't brought the banking system to its knees, helped destroy our healthcare system. I mean, that's my biggest attribute. The problem with this country is we have all these experienced politicians running the show, and it's been a disaster. And as I said, the real economic crisis is coming. What they've just laid the foundation for is going to make the collapse of 2008 look like prosperity compared to where they're leading us. And somebody needs to go to Washington and educate the other politicians that they're the source of these problems, and that if they keep doing what they've been doing, that 2010, 2011, 2012, it could be a horrific disaster. We can have massive inflation in this country. And if people think unemployment is high now, wait till they see how high it's going to get if we continue along this path.
Well, Peter Schiff, you've been a Senate candidate for 7 minutes, and you're already being attacked by Democrats. Welcome to politics.
Thank you.
And thank you for making the announcement on Morning Joe. It's great to have you with us.
Peter, I have one last attack for you, Peter. I was a reporter in Connecticut for a decade, and I've heard a lot from reporters over the past few days saying you need to talk to the local media. They're asking why you're not.
Well, this is national.
Want to get on the phone.
This is big, and we're big in Connecticut.
Well, I got an interview with the local media later this afternoon. I spoke with a reporter from the Hartford Courant last night from my home.
Okay.
So I'm talking to the local media whenever they want to seek me out.
I'll put someone in touch with you.
Very good.
Peter, thanks very much.
So Peter Schiff announces he's running for Senate.
Right here on Morning Joe. We're going to get a check on weekly jobless claims coming up from CNBC's Aaron Burnett. You're watching Morning Joe on our West Coast tour live from Seattle today. We'll be right back.